Hello, I'm Nadia Jani and you're watching A News. Here are your top stories. NATO military chiefs meet to discuss Ukraine and Russia. The White House says US troops will not be sent to Ukraine as part of a security guarantees. And Tel Aviv and Hamas consider a ceasefire proposal while the situation in Gaza remains difficult. US and European military leaders held talks on post-war security guarantees for Ukraine, following President Donald Trump's pledge to back protections under any peace deal. US Air Force General Alexis Grinkevich, who oversees NATO operations in Europe, briefed counterparts on Trump's recent Alaska meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump continues to push for a swift end to the war, raising concerns in Kyiv and among allies that he may accept terms favourable to Moscow. Earlier today, NATO military leaders gathered for a virtual meeting to discuss Kyiv's long-term security concerns following US President Donald Trump's meeting with his Russian counterpart. William Denslow reports from Brussels, where NATO headquarters is based.
This meeting of NATO Chiefs of Defence was chaired and held by Admiral Giuseppe Dragoni, who is the chair of NATO's Military Committee. Ahead of this online virtual meeting of Chiefs of Defence, Dragoni posted on social media that this was an opportunity that, as diplomatic efforts progress, to give an update on the current security environment. A huge question for NATO is providing long-lasting security guarantees for Ukraine going forward. We have a sense of the positions from the likes of Moscow and the United States. We've heard from Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister. He has reiterated Moscow's position that a hard red line for Moscow is Ukraine's membership into the NATO military alliance. He also says that Russia needs to be provided with security guarantees going forward as well. As far as the United States is concerned, and US President Donald Trump, well, he's ruled out US forces coming to Ukraine should the peace process in the future conceivably provide any kind of meaningful cessation of hostilities. So the question is, where does that leave other members of NATO, and what kind of role could they provide when it comes to security guarantees? There are talks, of course, of a reassurance force, the likes of potentially the UK or France providing some kind of military personnel to go to Ukraine in some kind of capacity. That could mean protecting critical infrastructure, be it ports, also securing Ukraine's skies overhead as well, should this peace process conceivably take root. These are all major discussions and a major request for Kyiv going forward. They are urging their allies and NATO members to provide those lasting security guarantees to ensure that should Donald Trump's efforts to achieve a peace process start to yield fruit, to ensure that going forward, Russia isn't simply able to regroup and come back at some point in the future and to continue acts of aggression or even to threaten other members of NATO or indeed the European Union that share borders with Russia as well. A huge concern for many here at NATO headquarters. William Denslow, A News, at NATO headquarters in Brussels.
The fresh diplomatic talks has raised hopes for movement on the Ukraine conflict, but the key players remain far apart. US President Donald Trump said they may provide air support, while Europe is willing to put people on the ground in a push towards peace.
The White House says President Donald Trump is committed to helping coordinate security guarantees for Ukraine, but US troops will not be sent to the battlefield. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Washington could provide support in other ways, including military assistance to Europe and possible air operations.
the president has definitively stated U.S. boots will not be on the ground in Ukraine, but we can certainly help in the coordination and perhaps provide other means of security guarantees to our European allies. The president understands security guarantees are crucially important to ensure a lasting peace, and he has directed his national security team to coordinate with our friends in Europe and also to continue to cooperate and discuss these matters with Ukraine and Russia as well.
Trump's remarks come after a week of high-level talks. He recently met Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska and then hosted Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky alongside 7 European leaders at the White House. Trump admitted the conflict is a tough one to solve and says it remains unclear whether the Russian leader is actually interested in peace. The Kremlin has played down talk of an imminent Putin-Zelensky summit. While Putin told Trump he was open to direct talks, he also proposed the idea of Zelensky traveling to Moscow, something Kiev is unlikely to accept. The following day, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov diluted the message, saying any meeting would need to be prepared step by step, starting with expert-level discussions before moving toward higher-level talks. In a televised interview, he also claimed that territorial changes are often part of conflict resolution.
I
would like to emphasize once again that we have never talked about the need to seize any territories. Neither Crimea, nor Donbass, nor Novorossiya as territories have ever been our goal. Our goal was to protect Russian people who lived on these lands for centuries, discovered these lands and shed blood for them. They founded cities in Crimea and in Donbass, such as Odessa, Nikolaev, many others, ports, factories, plants.
Lavrov said Russia does not reject either bilateral or trilateral negotiations with Ukraine. Meanwhile, Switzerland says it would be ready to host Putin for any peace talks, despite an existing arrest warrant for him from the International Criminal Court.
At least 14 people were wounded in an overnight Russian attack on Ukraine's northern region of Sumy. Russia launched 15 drones in an assault on the Okhterka area in the early hours of Wednesday. Ukraine's Prime Minister said that children were injured in the attack, which struck a residential neighborhood in the town. Russia has repeatedly said it does not target civilians or civilian infrastructure. In addition, a drone strike on Ukraine's Odessa region injured one person and ignited a blaze at a fuel and energy facility. Joining me now to discuss the Ukraine and Russia peace talks is political analyst Jorge Costa Oliveira. Good evening.
Good evening.
My first question to you is, do you think there could be a potential meeting between the two leaders, Zelensky and Putin?
No, to be fair, I think the only person that believes that from any such meeting there might be some useful result is Donald Trump. I think anyone that seriously follows the issue understands that it is necessary, as Lavrov just mentioned today, it's necessary to have a lot of preparatory work on a lot of details, and that is how negotiations make sense. That it was already there in 2022, shortly after the war started with the Russian invasion, and it will continue to be the same. It is necessary to go back and forth and see step by step what each side is willing to agree and to concede. I don't think anything good is going to come from a meeting between the two leaders on both sides, especially at this stage.
And Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Moscow must be included in any talks on Ukraine's security guarantees. Do you think that's fair?
Well, I'm pretty sure, well, certainly not fair, but I think Russia will be involved in everything. But let's not forget that the agreement in 1994 regarding the surrender of nuclear weapons by Ukraine was made under a written commitment by Russia, the United States, and 2 European states that all of them would provide for the security of Ukraine. And we saw what that kind of agreement and wording was worth in 2014 and now. So I'm not really. I don't think it's very important. Of course, Russia will have to be involved in all the negotiations, including the security guarantees. But the real issue is what kind of security guarantees can be implemented in a way that make Ukrainian people feel safe, because we are going on 11 years of huge tension and mistrust and hatred. So I don't think that the issue here, very important, is whether Russia is part or not. Of course, Russia will have to be part of all negotiations. The key issue is what kind of security guarantees can be granted that bring trust again
and
to the table.
Yes, and just on that, when it comes to security guarantees, Europe has said it wants to put people on ground, and the US has potentially said that it will do something in regards to airspace. What do you think could be the best situation for security for Ukraine?
Well, European states are democracies where the majority of public opinion stands for Ukraine against Russian aggression. Yet, most of public opinion will not favor putting boots on the ground, at least in significant numbers. Furthermore, we're talking about a war front that covers more than 1,000 kilometers. So I think what your piece showed is more realistic than what some people have mentioned. That is to say, perhaps we can expect to have a few representatives of European armed forces under the UN flag or not, to protect certain kind of infrastructure or in certain key areas. But I don't think that we'll have a lot of significant troops on the ground. That is not going to happen.
And Sergei Lavrov, he's in the report that we saw earlier, he said that Russia wasn't interested in getting certain territory. They wanted to protect Russian citizens who are living in parts of Ukraine. Do you think that it's hard for Putin to basically stop the war because he's invested so much in what's going on right now?
Oh, investing is what is spending a lot of money. Well, both sides have. Europe has. United States has. Everybody has invested a lot on this war. It is the number of soldiers that were killed. Well, Ukraine has the same level of investment, let's put it like that. At the end of the day, Russia has the upper hand in the war and definitely does not want to stop it now. It feels that if it prolongs it, it will be able to grab some more land. Lavrov's statements that this was never about grabbing land, I don't know whom he's speaking to, but it's not for intelligent people. It does not make any sense. And to be fair, it comes in line with the whole Putin's policy. This is an attempt to reenact the Russian Empire policy which was created by grabbing land, going first east and then into Central Asia. So it's nothing new. It's an attempt of grab land. The pretexts before were different in a different way. Today are this kind, and it's very, very dangerous because he thinks that he's now speaking to Western audiences. But if we think a bit more deeply, when he says that he's there to protect, that Russian army is there to protect Russian people, well, it's the same argument to go into Abkhazia, in Georgia, and it may be very much the same argument to enter tomorrow in Kazakhstan, where there used to be 35 to 40% of the population of Russian origin. So this is really a muddy reasoning that I don't think he's thinking carefully. It will make everybody nervous, starting with Turkey and Turkic-speaking countries where there has been, and there still is, a very significant Russian population. And obviously, that's also one of the reasons why people in the Baltic states in Europe are also nervous.
Yes, and where do you think these talks could go? Obviously, Europe is very much involved in all of this, as well as the US. But do you think that Russia is also stalling with these talks going back and forth and just trying to play time to get as much of, as you mentioned, grab as much land and territory of Ukraine?
I don't think there's any doubt about that. And now that the United States is not even willing to sell weapons, it keeps stalling and delaying and finding excuses not to make the deliveries that had already been agreed upon. Obviously, Russia understands what this means and will try to grab as much land as possible before agreeing to even a mere ceasefire. That's why we didn't see any results in Alaska, and we won't see anytime soon. Until the United States changes its stance, which I don't think is going to happen, the war is going to continue. So, to cut a long story short, I think the war is not about to stop anytime soon.
Thank you for joining me this evening, George. Thank you.
Thank you.
Over in Israel, tensions remain high as Tel Aviv and Hamas consider a ceasefire proposal. Meanwhile, the Israeli military says it's calling up about 60,000 reservists ahead of a planned grand offensive to capture all of Gaza City. A military official said the reservists would report for duty in September and that most of the troops mobilized for the offensive would be active duty personnel.
Israel says it's reviewing Hamas's response to a proposal for a 60-day ceasefire and the release of half the hostages still held in Gaza. However, some officials say that all Israeli captives must be freed for the war to end. The plan, brokered by Egypt and Qatar and accepted by Hamas on Monday, calls for the release of 10 living and 18 deceased hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. It also envisions a partial Israeli withdrawal, expanded, humanitarian, and what Qatar described as a pathway to a comprehensive agreement to end the war. Israel estimates that only 20 of the 50 remaining hostages are still alive. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to convene discussions in